Well, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming this evening. I'm Judy Knutson, and I'm the manager of the Center for Local History, which is here at the Central Library. And it's my privilege this evening to introduce Dr. Taylor, who is the speaker. Alfred O. Taylor, Jr. was born July 28, 1935 in Arlington County, and he attended schools here, but then also in the District of Columbia, where his parents had attended schools. He completed his undergraduate education at the Washington Technical Institute with a BS in technical teacher training. He has an MA degree from the Federal City College in Administration and Supervision of adult education, and his doctorate in education comes from VPI, and it's in Administration of Higher Education. After high school, he pursued his love of printing in both the private and public sectors, where he held management positions in both. And during this time, he was also a partner in, you can't hear me? No? Talk more into this? All right. Okay, I'm sorry. In 1979, after the establishment of the University of the District of Columbia, he was appointed the Associate Dean of the College of Physical Science, Engineering, and Technology, and later held several other positions at the university, retiring after a number of years of service. He remains very active in the Nauck community. The organizations and the positions he holds are much too numerous to list here. And he's also active in the religious community, where he also holds a number of offices. He says that his greatest personal joy is seeing the Nauck community as a viable link into the history, growth, and success of Arlington. He continues to work hard in the community to encourage Nauck residents to feel that they have a voice in the growth and direction of their neighborhood. And he also wants to find ways to better assimilate the different ethnic groups into the spirit and fabric of the community. He feels that the traditional ways of a culture can only survive if people value, learn, and pass on these cultural experiences to the next generation. And it is his hope that in this book, he will inspire them to do so. So, Dr. Taylor.
I would first like to thank each of you for coming out this afternoon for this kickoff for this book launching of The Bridge Builders of NauckGreen Valley, which I feel is a story that's untold of the contributions that the ones over the years have made both locally, nationally, and internationally. Yes, I can say internationally too. Well, what inspired me to do this book? I have to go back to my father used to always pass down stories. My father worked for Arlington County government for 44 years. And he would always pass down all of these stories of mostly why things were not. And I seem to have been blessed with a photographic type of memory where I remembered a lot of those stories that my father told me. People today, that's kind of a lost art of telling stories and passing down not only family stories, but passing community stories down. So I was always interested in knowing the things the people had done or previously while coming up. Then what really got me going on the project, every year at Black History Month, it seems that the students were writing about the same national characters year after year after year. It occurred to me that there were many stories to be told out of residents of Nauck who had made these contributions. So one day we were attempting to establish a resource center at Drew School. Portia, who is outside, Miss Emma Sanchez-Volin, who was on the school board at that time, Mr. David Beringer from the Virginia Foundation from for humanities, we were sitting around brainstorming of how could we establish a resource center that students who were attending Drew could go and study some of the stories of the people who had made contributions out of Nauck. It also hit me that I was always answering a lot of questions to different people on the history of Nauck, including some of the county officials who didn't know the history of Nauck. And it occurred to me, why shouldn't I write the story of Nauck, where it would be true history rather than someone else writing it where it becomes his story? So I had collected obituary programs over the years. Didn't know why I was collecting all these obituary programs, but nevertheless I was. So in talking in this conference, we were sitting around. Mr. Beringer from the Foundation for Humanity would bring me a whole lot of books that had been produced by the foundation on other communities. I picked up one book that was called Life for Me Ain't Been No Crystal Stairs by Francis Bibbins Latimer, who was raised on the eastern shore of Virginia. And the book grabbed me for some reason, and as I was thumbing through it, I saw a page, and on that page it was a picture of Judge Thomas Monroe, who was born on the eastern shore of Virginia. And I said, that's the kind of book I want to write for Nauck. So with the urging of Mr. Beringer, he told me, he said, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. Get it together, we give out grants, and we have a grant date by such and such a date. You may not believe it, but because of my memory and knowing where to go to get the stories, I then went to family members of people who owned businesses when we were growing up, or people that I knew of. A lot of them are people in the book are here and there, and I asked them to please write me a story on your family member. Your family member did this, or your family member did that. I want to publish a book. And the response that I got was overwhelming. They started to come in with stories and things written by the family about their family member. So therefore, I knew it was true history and not his story. And I started putting the book together. At Mr. Beringer's urging, he said, you got 3 months to get into my deadline if you want to get a grant during this next grant period. With his pushing, I put all of that information together in a 3-month time to send in my draft to the Virginia Foundation for Humanities. I could not write on the bridge builders unless I first considered our churches. Because coming up, our churches were the only social institution that we had. So most of the bridge builders in the church was affiliated with what I call one of the 4 anchor churches of the Nauck community. And the 4 anchor churches of the Nauck community would be Lomax AME Zion, that sits on the southeast. I call that my southeast anchor. Lomax dates back to 1866 in Freedman's Village, and it was part of the Little Zion Methodist Church in Freedman Village. In my book, you'll read the story where they took down the building in Freedman Village, board by board, and replaced it into the Nauck community. On the southwest or central, I call Macedonia Baptist Church my anchor church, which started in Nauck, the only one that started in Nauck, in 1908 in the living room of my wife's grandparents, Bonda and Amanda Johnson, in 1908. On the northeast, I say Our Lady Queen of Peace Catholic Church was the anchor church on the northeast. Prior to the Catholic Church coming there, we had no recreation facilities. The second priest at Our Lady Queen of Peace, Father Conda, built us an outdoor court, and amazing thing, the church, where the church is today, he painted a basketball court in the floor and made some portable basketball goals. And on Sunday after the last Mass, he would close off the altar, roll in the portable basketball goals, and we would play other Catholic churches from Washington, D.C., like St. Cyprian, St. Augustine, Holy Redeemer, the black parishes in Washington, and St. Joseph's in Alexandria. And one year, he took us to St. Emma's Academy, military academy down in Powhatan, Virginia. I don't know why, but there were two non-Catholics on the basketball team. I happen to be one of those. I don't know why it was. And on the northwest, I consider the anchor church of Mount Zion Baptist Church. And Mount Zion Baptist Church also was organized in Freedman's Village and was called the Old Bell Church. And Mount Zion still has the bell out of the Old Bell Church there. So I couldn't talk about any type of growth of the Nauck community unless I mentioned those churches, because they were our social gathering and most of the people attended. Then in my book, I talk about our community school, which is now called Charles Drew Community School. But I could not talk about the school unless I went back to the churches, because the first school in Nauck was at Lomax AME Zion Church, was a one-room school where the church used it for church services, and then other times when in the day, they used it for a school. They soon outgrew the one-room school at Lomax, and that was on the property of who I will get to, who we consider the original bridge builders of Sir and Levi Jones' property. They then relocated to what is now 22nd and South Kenmore Street. That's the property that's where Macedonia Baptist Church sits. There was a hall that was called Peyton's Hall. The church occupied the second floor. The school occupied the first floor. They then built a four-room school up at South Lincoln Street in what is now called Kemper Heights Apartment. And it was called Kemper School. And it said that that school was named after a Governor Kemper, who was leaning toward African Americans being taught. They then built a new six-room school down on the Baker property where it presently sits. It was a six-room school, but it had a boys' play area, a girls' play area, and that was called Kemper Annex. In fact, my wife was in the second graduating class from Kemper Annex. She and Roberta Flack were classmates in the second graduating class from Kemper Annex. In 1952, they renamed the school Charles E. Drew, after Dr. Charles E. Drew, who did not live in Nauck, but lived in what is now called Penrose, the Penrose section of Arlington. But they named the school after him because of his contributions to science, especially in the area of blood plasma. But Arlington history goes all the way back to the 16th century, and it's attributed to the Fraser family who came over to England. And I give you all that history. You can read it in my book, but our true history of the bridge builders started in 1844, when the two original bridge builders, Sir and Levi Jones, purchased 14 acres of ground in what was then Alexandria County. They then started to subdivide that land and give it to sell it to other African Americans because no one else would sell us land. At the end of the Civil War, it had grown from 14 acres to 17 acres of ground. Sir and Levi Jones obtained their freedom in 1801 from Mount Vernon. They moved to Fairfax County, then got disgruntled in Fairfax County and purchased ground in Arlington. I started to think about a lot of whom I consider bridge builders, and I'll give you an opportunity as it goes. Why did I name it Bridge Builder? I named it Bridge Builder because there is a poem by Will Allen Drumgold, and when I was going into the fraternity, it was one of the poems that we had to learn. And thinking about my book with the urging of Dave to publish a book, I then said I would name it The Bridge Builder because I felt this poem was so fitting. And the poem goes like this: The Bridge Builders. An old man going a lone highway came at the evening cold and gray to a chasm vast and deep and wide, through which was flowing a sullen tide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. The sullen stream had no fear for him. But he turned when safe on the other side and built a bridge to span the tide. Old man, said a fellow pilgrim near, you're wasting strength with building here. Your journey will end with the ending day. You never again will pass this way. You've crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build you this bridge at eventide? The builder lifted his old gray head. Good friend, in the path I have come, he said. There followeth after me today other youth whose feet must pass this way. This chasm that has been naught to me, to that fair-haired youth may a pitfall be. He too must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for them. And that has always been my motto. That's always been my life goal, that someone has to pave the way for others to come after them. I'm driven by a mythical West African bird that's called a Sankofa bird. A Sankofa bird flies forward while looking backwards. It says that we have to understand our past before we can appreciate how and why we are where we are today. I challenge people that everyone has a story, not just those people who I have within this book, and there are many more, which I hope will continue to go, but everyone has a story. I challenge everyone to write their autobiography, because in your autobiography, you put those things you want people to know about you. If they're bad things you don't want them in, throw them away. Only put the good things in. Always remember that one day your autobiography becomes your obituary. And that is what you want people to know about you, rather than people who write obituaries write what they want people to know about you. So I challenge each of you to write your obituary. What kind of stories do we have in there? You know, right today, what really bothers me is we have so many youth who do not know what their forefathers went through to prepare the road for what they have today. They take for granted that everything was as it is today, when we know that it was not as it is today. So what do we get out of that? You know, such stories that's in my book. How many people know where the University of the District of Columbia campus is located, the main campus? Okay, at Connecticut Avenue and Van Ness Street. I want to announce here that two brothers from Nauck were the architects of the University of the District of Columbia, whose sister is sitting over there today with Miss Frances Sellers. Not only did they design the University of District of Columbia campus, they were also the architects of the Dunbar High School, the Middle Dunbar, the one they just tore down, where they won many awards on that. They were the architects of Fort Lincoln, Newtown, Macedonia Baptist Church in Arlington, and Mount Salvation Church in North Arlington. In 1976, Black Enterprise named them as the largest architectural firm, not only in the United States, but in the world. They had some 500 employees and had done 700 projects in the United States, Ghana and South Africa. Two local boys. I look around, I see another bridge builder, Gerald Bullock. Gerald Bullock is an expert on the design of galleys for naval ships. He is looked on supposedly as an expert in these designs. Not only that, he also helped design the naval ship galley in the West Wing of the White House, and Camp David, local boy who went right to Drew Elementary School. I look out and I see Mr. Milton Rowe. Recently, we all viewed a film on the butlers at the White House. We have in our presence one of the butlers from the White House, and Mr. Milton Rowe. Not only was he a butler at the White House from Truman through Nixon, but he also did private duty butlering for the Kennedy brothers in McLean. The book is full of all types of stories. There's Clifton West. Clifton West sitting there, first altar boy at Our Lady Queen of Peace. Mother was one of the founders. Mr. Denia West was one of the founders who petitioned the Archdiocese to have a Black Catholic church in Arlington. Prior to that, the blacks had to go to Washington to worship at a Washington church, or to St. Joseph in Alexander, or in the balcony of St. Thomas. But his mother was one of the people who petitioned to have Our Lady Queen of Peace established at that point. In fact, she was the last living founder who just passed about 3 years ago. Not only was she a founder of the Catholic Church, she was one of our teen representative who ran teen clubs, because most of the same people in there, they also doubled as teen mentors and moderators. I just saw in the back, we have a story that I always like to tell of Reverend Richard Green. Reverend Richard Green was denied attendance in Washington Lee automobile shop because school was segregated at that time. His mother had to send him to, mother and father had to send him to Manassas to learn automobile mechanics. The next year, the county said they would give them the opportunity to study automobile mechanics, but not in Washington Lee's shop. They sent them to the Arlington County Property Yard and taught them at the Arlington County Property Yard. And amazing, the story goes on. Arlington then they decided they were going to hire some blacks to teach in the Arlington school system. One of the first people they hired was Reverend Richard Green to teach automobile mechanics at the Washington Lee shop, the shop where he was designed to physically at. Reverend Green is in the audience. I tried to make my book easy reading because what I tried to do was group it by categories so that people could read all about people in that category. So I have the people, one category is on business owners, another category is community activists, another category is local, state, federal, and private industry. Another one is those who went into medicine, those who went into law and politics, those who went into the arts, those who went into education, those who went into military, and those who went into religion. I can't talk about all of them, and you can't say most of them. There are pictures of some, but there are a lot of people whose story are in there that I do not have a picture of. But one of the stories out of military, we have a young man who grew up in Nauck, who lives in Woodbridge now, retired from the service as a major general in the U.S. Army. He was a quartermaster. He started a procurement system during the Vietnamese War that's still utilized today. He also was the first quartermaster to serve as commandant of the Army War College. Not only the first quartermaster, he was also the first African American to serve as the deputy commandant of the Army War College. We have all the ministers of our local churches, their story. And I see Dr. Hamlin, who's in the audience, who's one of the stories featured. And I can't call of it, but all of the people, all the bridge builders, stand up. Y'all everywhere. Mm-hmm. There are stories on all of these contributions. Clifton West. Clifton West owns B&W Medical Stat Lab. Medical Stat Lab, he does all of the drug testing and urine testing for the DC government and the Boxing Commission. He pioneered a way that the doctors can get back their test in a short time. He pioneered that system, and as a result of that system, that was the first laboratory that the DC government rendered a contract to. You'll have a chance to talk to him. I see other ones in the office. Miss Naomi Hawkins, who retired from that super secret agency over there in Fort Meade, Maryland. Quite a career in there. Let me tell you something about her father-in-law. When her father-in-law was 81 years old, he was one of the founders of the county fair that you see now. He was one of the first county fair, and for 10 years he served as treasurer of the Arlington County Fair. Mr. Floyd Hawkins was a beekeeper. All of the classes used to go, he had hives. He was known as an expert in bees. He was called out when bees were swarming. He was able to get to Mr. Floyd Hawkins. I have a section on the arts in that. You'd be surprised at what the students have done who in the section on the arts. Of course, we have Roberta Flack. Everyone knows the story of Roberta Flack. But also there's a Patsy Miller. Patsy Miller is an opera singer. She's on the staff of George Mason University, has done opera all over the country. There's another young lady in my book named Ayanna Blake. Ayanna Blake is also an opera singer, and she's also an actress in plays and things. She was the first African American to sing the lead in the opera The Marriage of Figaro at Shenandoah University and the Shenandoah Conservatory. She's now on the staff of Howard University. We have Miss Betty Carter, who's setting of their actress, who have played in many productions, played the lead role in the play The Crowns that was at Lincoln Theater. She grew up in the community. I see the daughter of Miss Mel Oliver. We call her Mel Oliver. There was a restaurant long years ago to the old people called Shady Dale. Shady Dale was located right where the Naucktown Park is now. But the unique thing about that was here we couldn't sit in restaurants and things. But when it snowed, the snowplow drivers used to have to stay out on the road for many hours. The county had arranged with her that she would be open regardless of the weather so that the snowplow drivers would have some place to eat, both black and white, during those times. The story of Dr. Leonard Muse, Doc Muse we call him, who opened the first drugstore in 1952 when we could not sit on lunch counters to have a fountain Coke or what. He opened the first drugstore with a lunch counter in 1952. Originally wanted to open it on Columbia Pike, but the county shooed him away from Columbia Pike because they wasn't ready for, So, but the amazing thing about Doc, he opened in 1952. Doc is still in the drugstore 7 days a week from 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Not only did he provide us with a drugstore, he provided us, that was the community meeting place was there. The story of George Moore, who had the first TV shop, because we couldn't go to the TV shops. We had to either take our TV, those who had them. Can you imagine having to lug on the big TVs before they came out with the plaza? We had those great big screens in that day, So he had the first TV shop in that. All of you see Friendly Cab Company running around, driving through the streets today. The owners of Friendly Cab Company still live in Nauck. It's a family-run business. Why did it start? Arlington Hospital during those days were not too receptive to African Americans. So African Americans had to travel to Freedman's Hospital in Washington, D.C. Mr. Ralph Collins started ferrying people to their health services in Washington, D.C., and out of it came the franchise that's now in use. It's called the Friendly Cab Company. So all of those stories, and most of the stories that you will hear from the people, the educators, Jackie Coachman, who's a historian in her own right, who wrote a lot of the forward history within my book, who went on to serve the city of Newark, New Jersey as administrator. Her story is in there. So the interesting stories that we have, I never want the people to realize that despite all of the obstacles that were thrown before a lot of the Nauck residents, that they all bounded together to support each other, to persevere, to make these local and national contributions. You know, if you don't pass down stories, a culture will soon be lost. And we are fast losing our culture because parents do not pass down stories anymore. So one of the inspirations for me to write my book was to pass down, have a vehicle or form where we could pass down some of the stories. And I must say that I've been inspired and people have been inspired by it, that I'm almost sure that there's a volume 2 somewhere on the horizon. So I will open up and take a little break here to field any questions, because in the end, I want to circulate and you to talk to some of the bridge builders so that you can get their individual story. Since at a forum of this kind, you cannot tell all the wonderful stories that we have. So if you have a question or you want clarification on anything, I will attempt to. I see one in. Okay, a lot of us went to Kemper School. I myself only went to Arlington schools until the 3rd grade. After the 3rd grade, my parents transferred me to D.C. public schools. I attended Stevens Elementary, Francis Junior High, and Armstrong Technical High. At that time, during the segregated days, there was one high school for Arlington residents, and that was called Hoffman Boston. Now, Hoffman Boston, of course, because it was the black school, was not afforded all the resources that were needed to give the choices to everyone. So the Washington, D.C. school system, although it was segregated at the time, they had 5 high schools that were for African Americans. They had Dunbar High School, which was college preparatory. And you'll read a lot of the people in there went to D.C. school. And I must say Dunbar was college preparatory because most of its staff had PhDs within themselves. They had PhDs, and because the D.C. public schools were supported by Congress rather than the state, they had more money coming to them. So these people elected to teach high school in the district in lieu of teaching at the historically black colleges, which were mostly church-run at that time and were scuffling to make ends meet themselves. They also had Armstrong Technical High, which I graduated, and which the Bryan brothers, who were architects, also graduated from Armstrong. And Armstrong was a school with its focus on technical-oriented types of classes. They had Cardozo High School, which had a business emphasis, of which my sister graduated from Cardozo. And Cardozo was heavily, had a lot of girls up there. I even got one of them. But because the federal government was the big thing in those days, they could go to Cardozo, take some business classes, and easily get a job into the federal government. They had Phelps Vocational, which was a boys' vocational, and also Margaret, not Martha, Margaret Washington was the girls' vocational school. So you could find 5 kids living next door to each other, all going to different schools because they all had different choices. So that's why our parents sent us to DC school. My parents were products of the DC schools because my parents were born in the Foggy Bottom section of Washington, DC. In fact, my father was born at 347 22nd Street Northwest. For those who know Washington, that is now the site of the State Department. My mother was born at 2600 I Street. For those of you who know Washington, that's the roadway into the Kennedy Center. My wife's mother was born on Prospect Avenue in heart of Georgetown. For those of you who know that, that's a block above N Street in Georgetown. So, oh, hey, how you doing back there? So, Al, we went to DC schools. A lot of us went to DC schools. Was it legal? No, it wasn't legal. But we had a relative in Washington. And sometimes you had to take the long way home to let them know that you had. So that's why a lot of us went to, back to on school segregation. With the help of Miss Emma, when she was president of the school board, and Dave, we put on a teacher content academy where we took 32 teachers of social science, teachers of the Arlington Public Schools, and we put on a teacher content academy that was called From Segregation to Desegregation. And we went from when they closed the Prince Edward school system, rather than to admit African Americans, all the way up to the desegregation. We also, at that time, had one of the 4 who integrated the schools at Stratford Junior High. He was also in attendance. We had Miss McGregor, who's still living here in Arlington, and was one of the last teachers at Huffman Boston when it closed in 1964. And the students were then sent to Wakefield High School, and Huffman Boston became part of Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson Annex. So, you know, it was a long continuum where a lot of the people in the book actually went to segregated schools without the best resources, but with a dedicated crop of teachers who inspired them to all the time do their best. So we are indebted to those. I'll feel some other questions. Yes.
A few years ago,
Only one of them.
you moderated a discussion here in the auditorium about, the title was Only the Ball Was White,
Only the ball was white.
about the black baseball teams in Arlington. So in your book, too, are you going to be able to talk about groups of
I didn't
bridge
really
builders?
talk as much about institutions or things.
But I'm
as I
saying
was
in book
putting the
2.
pictures on people.
In book 2.
In book 2. I will get out there for what she's talking about. The Green Valley community was known, they had 5 baseball teams out of there, and I mean 5 baseball teams who played high caliber baseball. We played all up and down the East Coast. I started out when I was 14 years old, playing with the Green Valley Black Sox, and I was the youngest thing on the team. I was pretty good, but I don't know whether it was because my potential wife's father was the manager. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it. But we had 5 baseball teams. Then later on, we formed a team called the Arlington Athletics. And that was supposed to be made of, that was the best of the best. I'm looking at you, baby. There's my center fielder sitting out there. They were the best of the best. We played up and down the East Coast. We played Major League farm teams. We played in places like York, Pennsylvania, playing the Washington Senators farm team, the York White Roses. We played in the Cleveland Indians farm team up in Milford, Delaware. Story about Milford, Delaware. We had a pitcher, great knuckleball pitcher named Melvin Boswell. He was pitching up in Milford, Delaware, and it was his time to bat. He got hit in the jaw with a baseball, broke his jawbone and things. We took him to the hospital in Milford, Delaware. You know the rest. We had to bring him all the way back to Washington before we could get some help for him. But we played under all of those type conditions. But it was high caliber baseball.
His brother Warren was probably one of the best hitters ever lived. I mean, what they would do, they would say he couldn't bat because at the time we didn't have many baseballs. And every time he hit the ball in the creek. And the ball get heavy and you couldn't catch it.
Yeah, he was a great hitter. He went into World War II and he played baseball with Army teams while he was in World War II. And then he came back and rejoined the baseball teams. Any more questions? Yes.
Sir, we are in Arlington Central Library, and you mentioned that part of the genesis of your book was talking about resources maybe for Drew, a learning center. And I wondered, in the course of either your research or have you found the local history room here to be helpful in terms of the African American history of Arlington, or are you able to sort of feed more history there? So I guess my question is, how does the local history room here serve the African American history that you value so?
Sure, we work very closely with Judith and Kathy Glennon and the library. In fact, part of the library, they have the Alfred and Dolores Taylor collection over there, where they have about 700 photos they have scanned into their collection database. So we have worked with them on trying to infuse more of this African American history into there. They have come out to the African American communities and taking their pictures and their documents and scanning them in to their collection. So yes, we have been working very close with them. We're working closely with the Cultural Center of the Recreation Department, and we have gotten grants to allow students to do oral history presentations and things where they go out and interview people to come up with the oral history documents. Excuse me, excuse me. No.
The reason why it's such a strong history of African American Arlington, after World War II, after the Civil War, most of the blacks came back to D.C. to get paid, and they were camped out behind Folger's Library in the Capitol. And Joan Howard got the commission to do the 20 acres and the mule. And he was a physician who started at Howard University. And he went down, most of the blacks, because it was swampland back over there, and they were catching cholera and tuberculosis. And he decided, I'm gonna send you all to the country. When the war started, the first thing the Union did was take Lee's plantation, which is Arlington Cemetery, et cetera. And he put them on this hill and had these barracks, had Freemanstown. And when that land became very valuable, the blacks had to leave. In the meantime, Alexandria was a county. And Alexandria wanted to become a city. So they petitioned Congress to become a city. And they split Alexandria County into Arlington County and Alexandria City. At that time, with more blacks in Arlington than were whites. And that's why blacks ran the county in the beginning.
They said at one time that Arlington was made up of 90% African American. I guess it was. They were all slaves at the Arlington house. It was only a few of Alexander. I got a Alexander. Well, can she get the mic? No, excuse me. Excuse me. I recognize somebody in the back.
The title, The Bridge Builders of Nauck, is a very powerful and strong title. Can you please tell us how you came up with it?
I did earlier. I came at it after the poem by Will Allen Drumgo. If you Google it, you can get it. It's a very powerful poem that's used in religious circles, and it's a poem about inspiration of going on to pave the way for others that come behind you. Okay, Mr. Rowe. Can we get the mic to Mr. Rowe, the butler from the White House?
I'd like to talk about my great-great-great-grandfather. He was the first policeman in Arlington County. He was on the executive board, and they needed a policeman to control the people that were on the outside of the center up there. And so he was selected as the first policeman, black policeman.
Yeah, that's Mr. William Rowe. His picture is across the hall in the place. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering, with all of your collections, do you have anything like maybe a picture of Sarah and Levi's home?
Yeah, there is a picture of it in the book. It said that it's the home they built, but it's torn down now. It was sitting on what is now South Shirlington Road. At that time, it was called Seminary Road, because that was the road that led up to Seminary section of Alexandria. But it was sitting right where, on that property where Margaret's Carryout and the barber shop and things sit. That's where it was.
And my second question is, would you also have anything showing the teachers from the old Kemper School and the schools before that?
I just received a document, and it had the dedication. I have the program from the dedication of the Drew Elementary School in 1952. And it had a picture of the staff that when they reopened, you remember, they closed Drew at one time. And in 1952, when they rededicated, called it Charles Drew, I have the program. It have the staff and the teachers who were there in 1952. And one of the staff people on there, I remember, was Reverend Richard Green's mother, was the secretary of the school at that time. So I don't have a lot of the teachers, but I do remember some of the teachers who were in the first Kemper Annex School. But I'm sure that everyone remembered the principal of that time was Miss Lillian Smackham. And she had the right name. she had the right name, Lillian smack them. But it goes back to, you know, Arlington schools, they didn't build Huffman Boston. Huffman Boston celebrates its 100th anniversary this year. They opened Huffman Boston in 1915. Huffman Boston is named after two individuals, Mr. Edward Huffman and Miss Ella Boston. Miss Ella Boston was one of the teachers at Kemper Elementary School when they opened it up. The amazing thing was Clifton's aunt, the school only went to the 7th grade. And Clifton's aunt, Miss Boston petitioned the school that they add on the 8th grade. And in that 8th grade, they added four students onto the 8th grade. And Miss Marguerite West was one of the 4. Mr. Henson Thompson and a couple was one of the 4. You know, interesting, people say, "Dang, Dr. Taylor, you got a good handwriting." As many times as I had to write, I must not talk in school. I had a lot of practice to practice by. But Mr. Noble Thomas built, he was the first black builder of schools in Arlington. He built the old Kemper School. He built John Langston Elementary School in North Arlington and things. He was the first hired by the school board to build. It's in the book. Tell them about the wall, Sandra. The wall, the famous wall down by Frank Wilson's house.
Well, there was a wall in Halls Hill. We were contained. There was a wall that separated us from the white neighborhood, and we really never thought much about the wall. You know, the wall was just there, and you just went on about your life. And in Halls Hill, at one time, we had one way in and one way out, and that was out on Lee Highway, which was a single-lane street when I was growing up. But the wall, part of it is still there. They cut through Culpeper Street and allowed the street to go to 16th. But that's the only place where it's open. The rest of the wall is still there. So if you'd like to see it, you can just come up Glebe Road, make a left on 16th, and when you get to Culpeper, you look to your left, there's the wall. It was probably 8 foot tall. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tall enough that they couldn't see over to see what was on the other side.
But it's not as tall now.
Oh, not now.
No, no, it's not.
How
as
tall was it? Yeah.
But it was.
I say it was 8 feet tall. Okay, I also see in the audience, I see Warren Gant. Warren Gant's grandmother was Pauline Ferguson, another bridge builder in the book who worked at the White House from Truman's administration through Nixon's first administration. She was in the housekeeping department, and her famous thing was each summer she was charged with going to Hyannis Point and opening up the summer home for the Kennedys. Yeah. Mr. Rose sitting over at one of the Kennedys got snowed in up in Mac Lane at a party he was serving, and they had to borrow his boots. President Kennedy had to borrow his boots.
I just want to say, tell him thank you for mentioning my namesake. He was a good baseball player.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Question in the back. Or were you stretching, son? Oh.
It was a question. I just wanted to ask, like, you had mentioned essentially like the disconnect between, I guess, stories being passed down and history being passed down. And I think this is like a great effort, obviously.
Excuse me,
I was saying, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well.
Project.
Yeah.
Project, grandson.
Yeah. But you were saying how it's like the disconnect between like history being passed down, and like I know I've experienced that, and like while you were writing the book, I found like a new pride kind of within myself, just as a person, as a young black male. And it's a lot of things that don't get passed down. So I would just ask, like, what do you think for the future? What do we need to do in order to preserve and also, I guess, allow that information to flow down to the younger generation with the kind of mutual disconnect? There's a mutual disconnect between older, elders and younger people, and how do we, I just kind of want your opinion on how we bridge that gap to where it's not so far down the road.
Well, what we're attempting to do, that's why we're attempting to have the Resource Center to reinterest the students to start researching their own. On Tuesday night, to those that we had a wonderful, wonderful thing at the new gallery that's opened up on 4 Mile Run and the Arlington Cultural Center. Well, we had a project at Drew School where we had a portrait artist to come in and work with the students on portraits. But as well as painting the portrait, they had to research the history of the person who they were painting the portrait of. So that was a chance that we're working now, trying different ways to get young people or those who are coming behind us to know about the history. One of the efforts that we have made in there, and there she is, my sidekick over there, Portia. That's my right hand over there, Portia, standing up against the wall. But one thing we have done in the Nauck community is, well, we're going to be here. Y'all ain't got to go nowhere now. It's raining. We can talk all night. But one of the things we have done in the Nauck community is when developers coming in, we are negotiating with developers to either name the project after the families that previously owned the ground, or at least put up some type of memorial plaque telling about the family that owned it. And to date, we have had them name some projects in the Nauck community after that were prevalent in the African American days. We have like the Shelton. The Shelton was named after Mr. Shelton, who started the Shelton apartment. We have Davis Place, named after Jenny Davis, who got an interest in housing because when she first moved to the county from Baltimore, she was rebuffed on where she could buy or where she could live. So therefore, she got interested in housing, and she was one of the founders of the AHC that was called Arlington Housing Corporation, but has now been renamed Affordable Housing Corporation because they do affordable housing not only in Arlington but MDW. We have Bruner Place on South Glebe Road. The project took Dr. Bruner. Dr. Bruner was the doctor in this community for over 40 years. Because we could not readily accept it at Arlington Hospital, during those days you were either born at home with Dr. Bruner in attendance, or you went to Freedman's Hospital. I happened to be one of the first when Dr. Bruner opened his office. No. Or he didn't open his office in Nauck till 1934, and I was, and it's in the book. He opened the office. So Dr. Bruner brought a lot of us into the world. Not only did he bring me in the world, he also hired me as a teenager to work in his office, and I think, so we have Bruner Place. We have on 17th Street, Perry Hall Apartments. Perry Hall was one of the first presidents of the was one of the first of the presidents of the Civic Association. We have Bowman Hills, that's named after the Bowman family. We have at Dunbar Homes, it's called Shirlington Crest at Nauck. But if you go there, there's a bronze plaque with the name of the 88 founders of the Nauck, of the Dunbar Homes. Dunbar Homes was built for government employees. At the end of World War II, it was offered to Arlington County for $1. Arlington County elected not to buy it. The 88 veterans who were living there at that time formed a housing co-op, Mr. O, or formed a housing co-op, and they got a philanthropist from New York. Of course, after they formed the housing co-op, the banks in Arlington, did not want to lend them the money, so they got a philanthropist to go to New York and get them the funding to buy the Dunbar homes. They bought it from the federal government for $200 and some thousand, and there were 88 homes that stayed in those veterans' control until they sold it about 5 years ago to Stanley Martin Corporation. There, if you go down there, there's a wall. So what we try to do is try to have those people's story told, like the story of Miss Black's father, Mr. West, Mr. Grandfather, I'm sorry, Miss Black grandfather was a builder. He built homes. In fact, her family was very fortunate. They had tennis courts that he built for his family back in those days. But the thing I want to make known, if you go up on Kirby Road in McLean, Virginia, there are still homes, in fact, just this one, that was built by Mr. West. All of these type of stories are in there. If you want any stories that's not in there, see Clifton West. I want to thank everyone for coming out. I hope that, everyone heard of Murphy? Murphy's Law? Well, Murphy's Law is in full bloom because the books did not arrive. But we have made arrangements, and I can promise everyone who sign up and get their book that we'll make arrangements to get the book to you. And the books, and I will sign it. They are real books, because this is a copy of the book. They are books. And I will make arrangements that everyone in here who purchased a book, just let me know, and I'll make arrangements to sign it. Yes. I want to thank you for coming. Yeah.